Hi, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creating an Equitable Regional Food System that Benefits Us All, the first of our 3 Northeast Food Security panel discussions at NOFA New Hampshire's 20th Annual Winter Conference. And I'm Nikki Kolb, NOFA New Hampshire's Operations Manager, and I'll be hosting this session with Laura Andrews, NOFA New Hampshire's Program Coordinator. And first, please note that we're recording this session and all sessions throughout the conference, and we'll share the recordings with you at the end of the week. Everyone will be muted during the workshop, so please type your questions into the chat box throughout the discussion, and either Laura or I will read out your questions when we get to the Q&A portion of the session. And for technical issues, please feel free to communicate publicly through the chat or message Laura privately. If you would like to access closed captioning, please click on the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can click the arrow on the CC icon and then click Show Subtitle. And if you're watching in a smaller screen, click the 3 dots button at the bottom of your Zoom screen that reads More, and then click on the Show Subtitle option. And you can let us know if you have any questions about how to access that. So before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that this conference is taking place on the land of the Pennacook tribe, or Ndakina, the Abenaki word for the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the Alnobak people who have stewarded this land through the generations. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Liz Henderson, representing the Agricultural Justice Project and Disparity to Parity Project. Lupita Gomez from Migrant Justice and the Milk with Dignity program, with interpretation by Will Lambek. Ray, a New Hampshire farmer and co-coordinator of the New Hampshire Queer Farmer Network. Sarah Harpster, the advocacy coordinator and former gleaner for the Community Kitchen in Keene, and Representative Alexis Simpson, prime sponsor of the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Bill, HB 1657. And during this panel, we'll discuss a range of food system equity issues, from farm and food worker justice to representation, hunger, and food security, and how we can better collaborate to build a food system that benefits all. We'll hear from each presenter about their work towards this goal, followed by Q&A. So please pop your questions into the chat along the way. And now I'd like to turn it over to Liz Henderson to tell us more about the Agricultural Justice Project and Disparity to Parity Project. And I'm going to pull up some slides. One moment.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm really honored and pleased to be part of this panel. My work in both AJP and Disparity to Parity is actually as a NOFA representative. Since I became active in NOFA back in the 1970s, I have hoped that we would create a network of farms and gardens run by and providing food to people who look like the population of New York State. That is much more diverse than the mainly white people you see at NOFA gatherings. Though I think it's important to point out that our organic movement has brought people of all ages into food and farming. When we finally got the New York State Commissioner of Ag and Markets to come to our winter conference, he exclaimed at how different the gathering was from the Farm Bureau, which was mainly older white men, while NOFA has as many women as men and lots of young families. So I'm proud to have contributed to the international task force that the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements convened to write the principles of organic agriculture: ecology, health, fairness, and care. These express the most deeply held values of organic agriculture, and NOFA has taken these principles as guidance in our policy work. And I call your attention especially, next slide, to the principle of fairness. This principle encompasses fairness on all levels, fairness to humans and to all of the critters, I've been involved in policy efforts on behalf of NOFA since 1989, when the Interstate Council asked me to represent NOFA at the first national gathering of organic farming associations from all over the country to discuss forming a national federation of some kind. And this first attempt was not really successful. We didn't last except a couple of years. The Organic Farmers Association Council, OFAC, didn't have the resources to both get ourselves organized and to take on the role of shaping the national organic program in a way that maintained the role of groups like NOFA and our small organic certification agencies. Lobbying for respect for the networks of organic farmers that we had already created took everything that we had. The organic label of the National Organic Program and the standards behind it address the first three principles of organic agriculture well. However, the NOP is silent on fairness. So together with others who were active on the National Campaign for Sustainable Agriculture Organic Committee, I submitted comments to the NOP about this omission. And the answer we got back was, this is not in our purview. So as a cross-sector group, we started meeting in 1999 with me representing the NOFAs. My co-conspirators were Michael Sly of the Rural Advancement Foundation International, Richard Mandelbaum and Nelson Carrasquillo from the Farm Worker Support Committee, Comité de Apoyo a las Trabajadores Agrícolas, CATA, Marty Mesh, who was formerly of the Florida Organic Growers and Consumers, and Oscar Mendieta of Fundación Renace in Bolivia. But we unfortunately lost him because the United States government wouldn't let him come into the country after a certain point. Our goal was to find a way to keep fairness in organic agriculture. And as Nelson Carrasquillo put it, you can talk about injustice and unfairness, but you have to demonstrate that there's an alternative. So we began a stakeholder process to develop standards for the fair and just treatment of the people involved in organic and sustainable agriculture. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the food justice standards. Through long discussions and many series of comments and revisions, farmers, farm workers, and other food system stakeholders developed the standards together of what has become a domestic fair trade certification, food justice certification, an add-on to the organic label or to other organic labels. And it's a project that campaigns for the reciprocal rights of farmers and farm workers, fair prices for farmers and fair working conditions for the people who work on farms and other food enterprises, all the way through the food chain from farm to table. And those standards include living wages, health and safety protections for workers, the elimination of exposures to toxic agrochemicals, and prices to farmers that enable us to pay living wages to ourselves and to the people who work on our farms. Next slide, please. The Agricultural Justice Project works to transform the existing agricultural system into one based on empowerment, justice, and fairness for all who labor from farm to retail. So the fair labor practice and improved pricing that AJP Technical Assistance teaches and food justice certification verifies help transform farm labor into the respected vocation that it deserves to be, given its importance in our lives. So please take a look at the short video we created where Leah Penniman of Soulfire Farm, Nancy Vale of Pie Ranch, and Steve Munno of Massaro Community Farm and president of the Connecticut NOFA board talk about why food justice certification and why it is essential to care for people with as much attention as we do for earthworms. So despite believing in fairness and social justice and wanting to be ethical employers, many organic farmers lack the information they need about how to go beyond legal to what is fair. So AJP provides these resources to make it as easy as possible for farmers to adopt fair practices. So if you are interested, you can fill out the self-assessment through the link that we're providing in the chat through SurveyMonkey. So much of the work done on Buy Local and in support of smaller scale farms have had to focus on tinkering around the edges, making incremental improvements that have made it possible for farms to survive and for some new ones to get started. But the underlying problems of systemic racism that functions as a mainstay of the corporate dominance of the food system has been beyond our reach and not realistic. Farmers have fewer choices of buyers and less market power because corporate consolidation has dominated our food system. So next slide. According to the National Farmers Union and research by Organic Henderson and Phil Howard and others, consolidation is dominating the organic market. And the next slide. And controls the market for the inputs that farmers need and also for the processing and purchasing of cattle, hogs, and chickens. So next slide. This consolidation has led to increased costs for farmers, less choice and competition in the marketplace, less innovation, and increased prices for consumers, and more opportunities for corporate profiteering from the disasters and fear campaigns that have been going on during COVID. So next slide. In turn, corporate control results in farmland consolidation and rural depopulation. Commodity prices are currently below the cost of production. Next slide, please. Farmer Brad Wilson makes the case very convincingly that the subsidies that politicians and foodies talk about so much have only replaced a small percentage of the wealth that has been transferred for farms to big corporations, and by the shift away from parity to a cheap food system. Next slide. So this slide shows how much wealth has been stolen from farmers and farm workers, and the subsidies that have been substituted for that have not made up for what has been stolen from us. So organic farmers who want to pay fair wages, and we need living wages ourselves. In order to achieve this, we have to make some big policy changes on the federal level. So instead of subsidies that prop up constantly falling farm prices and really only subsidize the big processors and import exporters, we need to have a system of fair pricing. So next slide. We need to dust off and refresh. Yeah.
We're going to have to move to the next speaker shortly. So
sure, I'm just about done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So we need to dust off parity and supply management. It's a national policy of price supports, which we had in this country from 33 to 53, and it functions like a minimum wage for farms. We farmers should know this history. And if you take a look, please, at the Parity to Disparity website, please put that in the chat. You'll be able to understand that parity with supply management is the system that we need. And it's the way that we can end exploitation for farm workers and for undocumented workers altogether, and bring food justice to farmers as well. The laws of corporate capitalism are totally inappropriate for food production, distribution, and sale. The food system of a new economics will have to be fair, apportioning the food dollar up and down the supply chain. We need domestic fair trade, where buyers pay farmers enough to allow us to use sustainable farming practices, to earn a living wage for ourselves and our families, and to pay living wages for the people who labor on our farms. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was really helpful. Let me get back to my screen here. Okay, well, I put all the links that Liz had asked for in the chat, and we'll also send out this information after the session so people can learn more. And now I would like to turn it over to Lupita Gomez from Migrant Justice to tell us more about Migrant Justice and the Milk with Dignity program as interpreted by Will. Thank you.
Hola, hola a todos. Sé que algunos ya he conocido en algunos otros espacios. Muchas gracias por el espacio para compartir un poco. Sí, soy Lupita Gómez con Justicia Migrante. Justicia Migrante es una organización de base liderada aquí en el estado de Vermont y también con alguna membresía también en New Hampshire. Y sí, quiero platicarles un poquito más acerca del trabajo que estamos haciendo y de por qué es importante también estar en estos espacios compartiendo la experiencia de mi comunidad.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lupita Gomez, and I'm with the organization Migrant Justice. It's nice to be here and share with you all. Some of you I recognize, many of you, this is new. Migrant Justice is a grassroots farm worker organization based in the state of Vermont, but with membership extending to New Hampshire as well. And I want to tell you a little bit about the work that we do.
Sí, también como contaba, somos una comunidad migrante. Aquí la mayoría de trabajadores estamos en los ranchos lecheros y hemos pues aquí tenido varias campañas exitosas acerca de derechos, ¿verdad? Como licencia de conducir y algunas otras cosas más, pero relevante, ¿verdad? Con el tema que estamos hablando, la campaña de leche con dignidad. Dale, Will.
And so our membership are immigrant farm workers and mostly workers in the dairy industry on dairy farms. We've been around for over 10 years, and some of our work is more focused on legislative campaigns. We've passed laws to give access to driver's licenses for immigrants and other things. But I want to talk about the aspect of our work more related to labor.
Desde que inició la organización y desde que nosotros, la comunidad, nos empezamos a organizar, hemos visto la gran necesidad en los ranchos lecheros de cambios y derechos como trabajadores, pero también como nos ha costado entender cuál es nuestro papel como trabajadores. Y ha sido como muy importante mirar como que somos una parte muy importante para toda la industria, pero muy poco reconocida en la historia.
And so since our beginning as an organization, we've tried to hold up the importance of dairy workers in the industry and also the challenges that we face, the abuses that we face as workers. And it's been hard for us to have our voices heard and have people understand what is the role of farm workers in this industry.
Entonces nosotros con esto, ¿verdad? Hemos entendido que tenemos un papel muy importante y que cuando hablamos de comida, estamos hablando de todo lo que eso conlleva y la parte de trabajadores y derechos humanos es una parte muy importante. Si estamos explotando las tierras y como también no estamos mirando los trabajadores es un tema importante para nosotros siempre que se pueda escuchar. Leche con dignidad es como la solución que nosotros hemos visto y relevante con lo que estaba hablando Liz acerca de las corporaciones y todo esto, cómo traemos que se haga responsable lo que está pasando en la cadena.
And so despite those challenges, we really work to raise our voices as farm workers and participate in these spaces when there's discussions around creating a more sustainable food system. We want our voices as workers to be there to say that it's not just about sustainability for the land, but for workers as well. And in that spirit, we've created a program that we call Milk with Dignity. And it comes from the same analysis that you were hearing just now from Liz about corporate consolidation in agriculture and in this case, in the dairy industry.
Y con este programa, pues nosotros queremos, ¿verdad?, que también los trabajadores sean reconocidos, que los trabajadores tengan un papel importante. Y cuando hablamos de las marcas o de los sellos en la comida, también entendamos que tener programas como Leche con Dignidad es parte importante de tener una industria y también crear como la comida justa que queremos todos.
And so Milk with Dignity is an attempt to intervene in this process. And it's an attempt based on workers ourselves. So workers have created this program as a way of reaching buyers and consumers to say that they need to take responsibility for the conditions, the labor conditions in their supply chain.
Entonces, el programa ya se ha implementado en muchos ranchos en el estado de Vermont y realmente ha sido como un proceso súper importante para nosotros como trabajadores ver los cambios que hay por medio del programa. Entonces, nosotros como siempre que estamos hablando de comida, queremos como que también escuchen, ¿verdad?, la otra parte, la parte de los trabajadores. Yo fui trabajadora en un rancho, entonces sé de las condiciones que hay. Y cuando hablamos de orgánico, no orgánico, pues aquí en los ranchos y en algunas granjas que conocemos, pues realmente orgánicos o no orgánicos, las condiciones laborales vienen siendo muy similares y queremos que eso también sea transformado.
And so we have created this program and now it's operational. And we have Milk with Dignity on farms in Vermont and New York. And going back a bit, I've been a dairy worker myself, and I've worked on farms, and my community are farm workers. And I can say that whether or not a farm is organic or not has very little bearing for the workers ourselves, that there are labor abuses on conventional farms. There are labor abuses that happen on organic farms as well. And it's important to understand that from the workers' perspective, we don't see that the treatment is necessarily different.
Y también podemos dejar un poquito más información de la campaña que tenemos, pero queríamos compartir eso.
And so that's what I wanted to start out by sharing in this initial presentation. And then if there's follow-up, we can share more about the Milk with Dignity campaign and program if you'd like.
Thank you so much, Lupita and Will. That was so helpful. And I did put the information about migrant justice and the Milk with Dignity program links in the chat, and we'll send out more information after the session as well, as I mentioned. And so I would now like to introduce again Ray from the New Hampshire Queer Farmer Network to share with us a little bit more about their work. Thank you, Ray.
Hi there. We are a very nascent organization. And by nascent, I mean we had our first informal gathering in December on Zoom, and then a follow-up gathering in January in person, which was really well attended. So we're the New Hampshire Queer Farmer Network. And I want to give you the story about how we came about so that it's all like very what's the word I'm looking for? Clear. The UNH Cooperative Extension got a grant for farmer stress that from the USDA. And I'm working with UNH Cooperative Extension as a contractor to help support farmers having access to mental health services in the state. And in discussion about how to allocate resources for mental health services, financial services, and legal services that come with this grant, there was discussion about how do we make sure that the distribution of these resources is equitable. And one thing I discovered early on is that that question wasn't really obvious in New Hampshire. Folks were like, but there aren't that many people that are BIPOC or queer here, so why do we have to be like focused on this? Like, why would we have to like allocate resources to develop such a network or these networks? And that was really challenging for me as somebody who is a queer farmer in a rural space who is very assimilative. It's easy to assimilate and just kind of get along with folks and focus on the work. Because I knew a bunch of queer farmers, and I also knew that, they don't have the connection to farm bureaus and Department of Ags and cooperative extensions that a lot of other farmers have for whatever reasons. I'm not speculating, and everybody's reasons are different. And there's some research that points to some reasons, but I'm not going to share that today. So I got really excited and was like, that we had that discussion, or that discussion was had, that a queer farmer coordinator was hired, and she couldn't be here today. And she's the co-coordinator of the New Hampshire Queer Farmer Network. And our charge was to find the queer farmers, to connect them to resources at a minimum. And then she and I are super excited about the possibility, and now it's been reinforced by the folks who have showed up, to create a queer farmer community in the state where we can share ideas, we can share like practices, we can share labor and resources, we can, just share, our passions for both farming and also our identities, like outwardly and openly and celebratorily. So currently, if you are queer and farmer identified and want to join, what we have is a listserv where we can share information. We can connect you to the financial and farmer mental health and legal resources that are available starting literally this week. It's kind of appropriate that I'm here. It's excited. And also we're having in-person gatherings. We've scheduled a few already, and they're fantastic and super fun. When it comes to like why that's important, I just want to emphasize, if you don't understand or curious as to why it's really important for queer folks to connect, queer folks, like a lot of other marginalized communities, data shows, have typically less access to things like land and credit, knowledge and education and work than cisgender, heterosexual identified folks, especially in farming, where the narratives of like the family farm typically include heterosexual couples with children that include lineage of typically white males, and that when you're a queer, non-cisgender identified person or in a homosexual relationship, only recently have you had access to marriage, which gives you access to credit. So there are a lot of barriers that we're starting to break down, but that we're very much in the beginning of breaking down. And a lot of queer folks are facing significant barriers to entry to farming, more significant than, the average beginning farmer. And then if you have an intersecting identity with being a person of color, like that is even more challenging. So having this network here in New Hampshire is going to point to those inequities. It's going to allow us to become visible, which is the other piece. In rural communities, often queer farmers are not visible, either by choice or by need and necessity. So we become visible. We're going to point to the needs and the problems, and also celebrate the differences and connect with other queer folks. One of our projects that we're going to work on is putting together a queer-friendly farm, or queer farm and food business map or guide. It's kind of one of the tangibles we're excited about, other than creating a network and building resilience and sharing resources. So that's quick. We're babies, and we're excited for folks to join. So you can contact New Hampshire Queer Farmer Network at gmail.com anytime, and we're happy to connect.
Great. Thank you so much, Ray. That backstory and the history and all the information that you shared is so helpful. And I'm going to put the your email, because couldn't think of the word, into the chat here. So nhqueerfarmernetwork@gmail.com if you want to get in touch and learn more. And yes, thank you so much again. And so now I would like to turn to Sarah Harpster so that we can hear more about the work of the community kitchen in Keene. Thank you, Sarah, when you're ready.
Thank you all. I so appreciate being a part of this conversation and so enlightened so far with the conversation that I've heard about our space in New Hampshire around food systems. And to have the opportunity to talk about this question and think about it. I've been thinking about this question for the past few days. Co-creating an equitable regional food system that benefits us all. I thought about, we're always co-creating equity and inequity through our choices and our relationships. And we do that at every scale too, right? I mean, as individuals, we're constantly co-creating equity and inequity. And then as we go up to organizations and networks and systems, we're just expanding that impact of what we're doing. So where does a soup kitchen and a pantry fit into all of that? We had the community kitchen. We're here in Keene, New Hampshire. We serve 6 meals, 5 suppers and a Sunday lunch every week to about 100-ish people each time. And about 300 folks, families, individuals or families come through our food pantry every week. So we are a parallel food system in the charitable food system. There have been food charities as long as history goes back here and there. The one Gather in the Seacoast has really been around since the early 1800s, but there was a whole big explosion in our industry that really came about in the 1980s because there was a shift in federal public policy around the support network that we had through SNAP, through food stamps, as they called them, and other programs like welfare. And so this parallel food system where the food is free and where you're taking extra food from the food system, kind of the leftovers, that became a whole system that has pantries, and then it has regional or state level food banks, and then you go up to Feeding America and you have sort of a whole organizer of the food system. And referencing Liz's points, one of the functions of all of this is that all that extra food doesn't just get handed out and then suppress the prices of food in the markets. It's gotten out of the way and given to different people. And there's additional costs to all this work, and that comes from philanthropy and social benefactors. So what are some questions that come up when we create this whole alternate parallel food system? Who uses these services? Are they the same people every time? Do we have some notions about who those people are? And do the people who use these services have a lot of choices when they come to the community kitchen or other places like us? Is this just part of somebody who has a lot of choices, everyday choices that they want to make? And then who benefits? What are the main functions? As I mentioned, one of the functions that this system does have is to keep the prices higher in the market because there's not all of this extra food in the system that people are choosing how to move around. When there's a separate system, there are boundaries between those who are in and those who are out, those who are the givers and those who are the receivers. And when there are boundaries like that, there's power, and that has an impact on whether there's equity. So then I asked myself if soup kitchens and food pantries offer some social good, and I would argue that they definitely do. Without the food that we do get to our guests every week, the situation they would be in would be untenable for them. How can we also in this space foster equity and choice and power for the people who are on the other side of the equation? Can we dissolve some of the boundaries between the people who meet in our space? Can we make it a place where there's mutual learning and sharing of power and building of networks? And then we'll talk potentially in a few minutes about the relationship between organics and regional food systems and how charitable food pantries and organizations fit into the picture. Because in the Monadnock region, we are developing some projects just now in 2022 around local purchasing from our local farms so that we can enhance what we are able to offer through the community kitchen. And we are doing our third year of a project we call Harvest Bridge, where we have people preserve some of the local food in restaurants and give it to our guests in the winter. That improves nutrition and the quality of what we're able to offer. But it's really a space of a lot of questions. I've taken this role as advocacy coordinator. It's just almost been a year now. There's great literature. I always point people to Katie Martin's Reinventing Food Banks and Pantries as kind of a starting place to realize that there's opportunities in this space, but what we've had over these past so many decades has not always been one that fosters equity and justice, but we do have an opportunity to do that. So thank you for letting me share in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm really excited to hear about the new projects that the Community Kitchen is embarking on. And I did share your web link again in the chat, and I know we'll continue this conversation as we open up to Q&A. And before we do that, let's hear from Representative Alexis Simpson, who will share more about the Local Food for Local Schools bill. Thank you, Representative Simpson, when you're ready.
Thank you, Nikki. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be joining all of you today at the conference. It's good to see so many familiar faces from my NOFA policy days. I'm Alexis Simpson, as Nikki said, a state representative from Exeter, representing now Exeter, Newfields, Newmarket, and Stratham. I'm here to speak about the Farm to School Reimbursement Policy Bill, HB 1657, also called the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Bill. This bill will allow for increased participation in the Farm to School program by farmers, producers, and schools across the state. The bill has had a hearing in the House Education Committee a few weeks ago. We are currently waiting for a vote there, and then the bill will move on to its next phase. This bill represents many hours of dedicated time and energy from stakeholders across the state. Those in the agriculture and food sectors, those in the school nutrition programs, and those community members who represent the social and physical infrastructure that makes our local food economy thrive. Many of you are here today, and thank you all for the work that you have done to put together this bill and bring it to where it is now. And you also will be the ones who will do the work to make this program development possible. If it is passed, it will require all of us to work together to help it, help our dreams be realized for what it can be. The investment we are asking the state legislature to make will make it possible for more schools and more communities all over the state to take advantage of the benefits of local food for local schools. We currently have many schools that participate in the Farm to School program, and many farms as well, but not all schools have the resources to participate. Neither the personnel or the money or the capacity in their kitchens or the supply chain infrastructure to make participation possible. Our hope is that this bill will provide financial support to encourage and allow more schools across the state to participate. The program will nourish more children, support more local farmers and producers, and strengthen the supply chain resiliency, allowing for equal access to local food across New Hampshire. With this policy, we can improve the health and well-being of our children and the resiliency of our local food system. A couple of notes about the details of the bill. The Department of Education's Office of Nutrition Programs and Services would provide a monetary incentive to schools who choose to direct more of their per meal cash reimbursement funds from the USDA. They would direct these toward purchases from New Hampshire and New England farmers. The state would encourage this channeling of federal funds into the local economy by awarding schools $1 for every $3 they spend on food from New Hampshire, and $1 for every $6 they spend on food from the New England region. The goal is for our local schools to be purchasing at least 10% of their food from local farms. By offering every school a reimbursement of up to $1,200, we would be investing in our children's health. And by redirecting 1.2 million federal dollars into our local economy, we can ensure that we build the food systems infrastructure that will make us resilient for the future across the state. Our children's health and the health of our farmers and producers and our farming communities are worth the $600,000 investment from the state. A robust farm to school program will help strengthen New Hampshire's agricultural sector and contribute to regional food security. It'll also provide natural opportunities for educators to help our students understand the regional agricultural, geographic, social, and cultural aspects of our food system in New Hampshire. Thanks again for your support for this legislation and for the local food system. You might like to know before I stop, and I will take any questions as well, but you might like to know where the bill is right now. The Education Committee will be having a work session on Tuesday afternoon. So it'll be a full committee work session. They have invited some folks they want to hear from to try to make the bill workable for them so that hopefully they will pass it. When they vote for it, I'm very optimistic, when they vote on Wednesday morning. They'll recommend whether or not they want the bill to go forward. And then either way, it will be voted on the floor of the House, I'm positive, next week, because the bill would need to go to a second committee. So there's a deadline for that. If the House supports it, it will go to the Finance Committee. And we can talk about what happens after that. But I really appreciate you staying engaged through the whole process. There's a lot of enthusiasm about this program, and I hope that will translate to its passage. So please keep talking about the bill with your friends, your neighbors, and your schools, and look out for email updates from NOFA New Hampshire. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about this today.
Thank you so much, Representative Simpson. That was so helpful, and I'm really excited to hear about the progress. And of course, we're hopeful as well about the next steps with the bill. So I want to thank all of you again for sharing the important work that you're doing in New Hampshire and beyond to advance equity in the food system. And we have about 15 minutes left for Q&A, and I would like to kick that off with at least one question from NOFA, and hopefully we'll also have time for questions from the audience or potentially one more question from NOFA. But before I do pose my question, I just would like to kindly emphasize that everyone can, a request for everyone to be respectful in the chat and to keep an open mind as we're going through these discussions and we're learning together and working together on building and creating a more equitable food system. So thank you. And my first question for all of our panelists, so please chime in one by one when you're ready, is how can we co-create an equitable regional food system for all, and what action steps can we take toward that goal? And maybe we can go in the order of initial speakers if that might be helpful for everyone.
Sure, I'm happy to start.
Thank you, Liz.
I think to build a more equitable food system, we need to really build alliances between the NOFAs and organizations like Milk with Dignity and Migrant Justice. Farmers and farm workers are pitted against one another by the pressure, the downward pressure that's constantly placed upon us by low prices for food, for the low prices that farmers get, and the low wages that farm workers receive in this country. And that's how the cheap food system is maintained. We have to work together as allies to change the system. Food has to be recognized as a right, not as a commodity. And efforts like creating parity pricing with supply management will ensure that farmers get prices that are high enough to cover our costs of production, including living wages for ourselves and for the people who work on our farms. Most of the organic farmers are not making their full living from their farms. We get our health insurance by having someone in the farm family work off the farm, and they get the health insurance rather than getting a high enough price that we can pay for health insurance ourselves. So building these alliances and working together is a first really important step towards making the change to take the power away from corporate domination and bringing it back to our local communities. And efforts like that of, what Alexis is pushing for, buying food from local farms, is exactly what we need to do. Those are steps very much in the right direction.
Thank you, Liz. And Lupita, we'd love to hear from you when you're ready, if you have a response to the question.
Sí. Gracias. Pues comparto un poco lo que decía Liz acerca de colaborar más como trabajadores también, ¿verdad? Para entender bien pues estas campañas que tenemos y cómo realmente es que forman parte de este sistema. La otra también es aprender mucho, ¿verdad? Quiénes estamos ahí y cómo necesitamos proteger, ¿verdad? Como que todo el sistema de comida sea justo y equitativo. Pensaba lo que decía Liz, o sea, exactamente lo que ella decía, ¿verdad? Es importante que estemos sabiendo que cuando las grandes corporaciones están presionando, eso significa pues bajo sueldo y malas condiciones para los trabajadores, y realmente pues que todos juntos estemos transformando esto, aprender más, escuchar más de los grupos que están para conectar. Necesitamos estar realmente conectados para que realmente haya un cambio y que entendamos que esto es parte de todo esto y que pues sí, necesitamos estar más en comunicación. Son intersecciones muy importantes entre trabajadores, rancheros y todos los que estamos en la cadena.
So I really want to echo what Liz said, and I thought it was really important that we need to have more collaboration between farm owners and farm workers to understand the commonalities that we share within this corporatized food system, and that we can work together to mutually benefit. And so I want to invite people to get to know us better as a workers' organization, and understand the struggle that we have isn't against farmers, but rather we want to be working with farmers to improve our conditions together. So yeah, just to thank Liz for what she said, and add that piece.
Thank you so much. Now, I think Ray would be next.
Yeah, so when I read this question, I was like, who are we? So I get a little hung up sometimes in semantics, but who's the we that we're referring to? Are we talking about farmers? Are we talking about consumers? Are we talking about folks in power, politicians, et cetera? I think there's a lot of we's that are represented even here today on the screen. And I really think one of the things, I mean, obviously, food system equity, the establishment of huge systems, the deconstruction of systems takes enormous effort, and it's so complex and it can be overwhelming. And so a lot of people default to not really being able to do much. So as also a therapist, I think about like, how do we pare things down into like a manageable, some manageable work, right? So that I don't get overwhelmed and just, I get too much anxiety, I'm not gonna do anything. So I think the we is like first identifying like, who are you in the system, and like, where is your power, or where is your lack of power? And then leveraging that power however you can, and connecting with folks who can help you leverage that power. So as a queer farmer, I need to work in collaboration with organizations and institutions that either are working with me or working against me, and try to have, conversations that break down barriers. As a consumer, though, I need to like decide where I can purchase food, where I can afford things that contribute to like my local economies. As a student, I can push my teachers and educators and administrators to engage in, the local food system. As a parent, I can advocate on behalf of my students or children. So like for me, it's like figure out who the we is for you. So who am I and where am I located in the system? And then where can I be most effective? I think about Alexis because I've known her for a long time as a parent who then became a food advocate, who then became a politician. And it's been amazing to watch that process. She figured out like where she could do work. And I think it just like grew from that immediate, like that initial interest. And then for me, it was as a student advocate for local food in my college, and then interest in growing became a passion and a pursuit of farming, and then farm policy. So again, how do we do this? Well, figure out where you fit best and where your voice can be heard, and connect with people who can help elevate that voice. Yeah, we have to work together. I mean, none of us are alone in that. So.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was so helpful. And I loved how you identified that. Yes, you're so right. There are so many we's, and I'm so glad to hear you coming from the perspective of, finding that for each of us, for each of our panelists. And I'm glad to hear that perspective on the panel. And Sarah, I'd love to hear from you next as well with your perspectives.
Yeah, I think all of these themes are echoing each other. I think we're all talking about engaging in the conversation, building these networks and these conversations together, identifying who we are in the conversation, and representing the folks who can't afford the food that's in the market. Where are they in the conversation? How do we get their voices into this conversation and the stories? How do we ensure that we're building a culture where the right to food is considered clearly key to our food system? And I'm agreeing with everything that Liz and Lupita are saying here too. The folks that are pushing against them are the same folks. Even though prices are kept really low, they're kept at a place, and the excess goes to folks who aren't necessarily supporting the idea of a functioning food system for everyone. So I think, bringing people's stories into the picture and making those connections and helping to ensure that together everyone's voice is building this food system. People who are left out as eaters are brought into the conversation with people who are growing the food and struggling to make a living as well. So bringing everybody's voice in.
Thank you, Sarah. And Representative Simpson, if you have anything you'd like to add, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I am nodding my head to everything that everyone else has already said. So I'll say something very specific about the work that I'm doing with this bill right now. And that's to think through, once this policy is in place, how can it become a reality? And when my kids were small, I did a lot of work with our nutrition services director at the schools, and just opening a line of communication with her and her staff taught me a lot about what were some practical impediments that were in the way to bringing more local food into the cafeteria. And so if you are in a place where you're able to, maybe you have some time, or somebody, or you have a friend on PTO, or you are on PTO or something like that, if you can open up a relationship with your food service director and let them know that you would like to support them in bringing more local food into the cafeteria, then they can tell you what might make that difficult for them, and how the community can support them in moving that forward. And sometimes it's things you might not think of, like we don't have ovens, or we don't have knife skills, Or, I mean, we provided some free training in knife skills to some of our cafeteria staff about 10 years ago. And it really enabled them to deal with many more local vegetables that they hadn't been using before, kind of at the beginning of our local food program there. So you might be surprised at how you can help and take some action steps that are very concrete and immediate.
Thank you all. And I just would like to add that I think one way we can all work together on co-creating a more equitable regional food system is to learn more about the initiatives of all of you, our panelists here today, helping to support the campaigns and working together. And that's also why I wanted to convene all of you to share your great work. And I think that all of you are engaged in really excellent initiatives in New Hampshire, regionally, and even beyond. And so I think that Lupita, it would be wonderful if you could share with us just a little bit about the Milk with Dignity campaign in relation to Hannaford. I think that folks would like to learn a little bit more about that. And then we have about 3 minutes left, and so I'll just close up whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Sí, muchas gracias por darme la oportunidad de compartir más de Leche con Dignidad. Pues como había dicho, es un programa súper chido, realmente creado por trabajadores que tienen el modelo de WSR, ¿verdad? Que trae a las grandes corporaciones, en este caso es Hannaford, que estamos haciendo la invitación. Y perdón, Will. Sí.
So yeah, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit more about this and to be on this panel. So Milk with Dignity is a program that I'm really proud to be able to talk about. It's a program created in the model of worker-driven social responsibility, where workers create a program and strive to get corporate purchasers to sign on to the program to define their sourcing. Right now, we're focused on the supermarket chain Hannaford for their milk sourcing.
Entonces, ya tenemos como Ben & Jerry's dentro del programa de Leche con Dignidad, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿qué pasa cuando una compañía entra al programa de Leche con Dignidad? Pues los ranchos que venden a esta gran compañía, pues reciben un premio importante, ¿verdad? Y ese premio es económico, que ayuda a suplir pues las necesidades del ranchero, pero también los trabajadores.
And so currently, Ben & Jerry's is the first participating buyer in the program, and we're working to get Hannaford in as the second. When a company joins, they talk to their suppliers and begin to pay those suppliers a premium, an economic bonus that's important for their operations, and that is shared between the farm owner and the farm workers.
Entonces también, resumiendo, ¿verdad? Como después de recibir un premio, pues también los trabajadores, pues hay un código de conducta, ¿verdad? Y para saber cuáles son los derechos de los trabajadores, también hay un grupo que le llamamos el Consejo de Leche con Dignidad, que se encarga de monitorear que lo que pasa en los ranchos, pues, ¿verdad? Se están cumpliendo y se está llevando a cabo.
And in exchange for receiving that premium, farm suppliers are required to adopt and abide by a worker-authored code of conduct that sets standards for wages and labor and housing conditions. And we've created a third-party body to monitor conditions on participating farms to make sure that workers are receiving the standards set out in the code of conduct.
Entonces, con todo esto ha sido un impacto muy grande para muchos trabajadores y muchos rancheros dentro de la industria, y por eso también estamos invitando a Hannaford a que sea parte de este cambio. Todavía falta mucho acá en la industria por cambiar, ¿verdad? Con Ben & Jerry's no hemos cubrido todo y queremos, pues, estamos invitando a Hannaford, ya llevamos mucho tiempo ya tratando de hablar con ellos, hemos hecho piquetes, marchas, hemos ido a sus oficinas centrales en Maine para invitarles, hemos hecho como muchas acciones para que escuchen realmente de los trabajadores qué es lo que está pasando.
And so for the farms that are in Ben & Jerry's supply chain, this has had a huge impact and has really changed things for those farms. And raise standards for workers. But that's just a start. There are still many farms that are outside the program, beyond Ben & Jerry's supply chain. And so we're campaigning to bring more companies in to follow in Ben & Jerry's footsteps, and that's starting with Hannaford. And we've tried everything we can to get them to listen so that they can take responsibility for the conditions in their supply chain. We've had marches and pickets and actions. We've gone to their headquarters in Maine, and we're going to fight until they listen to workers and take this important step to join Milk with Dignity.
Y es importante que todos nos apoyen y que estén pues en solidaridad con los trabajadores, ¿verdad? Para que realmente Hannaford nos escuche y que sepa, ¿verdad? Que pues aquí estamos tratando de que él llegue a un acuerdo con los trabajadores y que pueda entrar al programa de leche con dignidad. Bueno, hacemos la invitación también del 10 al 12 vamos a estar en Maine y vamos a tener una acción por allá el sábado.
And so we're asking for everybody's support to join in this campaign to support farm workers and calling on Hannaford to join Milk with Dignity. And there are many ways that you can get involved. And in particular, we're going to be at their corporate headquarters in Scarborough, Maine on Saturday, the 12th. And we invite you to join us there.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lupita. And as Lupita mentioned, the Milk with Dignity campaign is very active. So you can go to their website, you can follow them on social media and learn more about their current actions, ways you can help in person, ways you can help from home, from your phone, all these types of things. And I know that we are 2 minutes beyond time. So I want to thank everyone again, our panelists, Liz, Lupita, Ray, Sarah, and Representative Simpson for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us today and all your great work. And I want to thank everyone also for joining us on our first day of NOFA New Hampshire's Winter Conference, our 20th annual conference. Thank you for staying with us on this cold Sunday. And we hope you'll join us for the next session, Resources for New Hampshire Food and Farm Business Success, which is taking place tomorrow, Monday, February 7th at noon. And we'll put the links in the chat for all of the sessions. And in the meantime, if you haven't yet already today, please check out our virtual exhibitor fair featuring 17 different exhibitors, including our conference bookstore hosted by Main Street Bookends. And when you order any books through Main Street Bookends and include NOFA New Hampshire in the comments, 20% of proceeds will be donated back to NOFA-NH, and that can be any book at all. It doesn't have to be a book on our conference book list. And please also mark your calendars for a few upcoming programs, NOFA New Hampshire's Farm Bill listening session on February 17th, and our Feeding the Family Organic Gardening Series, 6 sessions from February 22nd to May 3rd. And also, please check out our bulk order program to save on farming and gardening supplies. The order deadline is February 28th, and the pickups are on March 19th and 20th in Andover, New Hampshire, Ware, and Rochester. And thank you so much again for being with us, and hope you all have a wonderful night. And thank you again to our panelists.